guys are fun. That's the Y Studs doing their Seder verse on, singing about the Seder with a tune based on Michael Jackson's Thriller. How are you, my holy sisters and brothers? It's great to be with you. Let's light up the darkness. Got some beautiful learning to do. We're going to cover 2 Mishnas. Who is with us as we get it going on a Wednesday night? And we have in the back of our minds that tomorrow is a fast day. We fast during the day before Purim night. That's the fast of Esther. We recall Esther, that she instituted a fast when the wicked Haman convinced King Ahasuerus to wipe out all the Jews in the world. Thank God, between Esther and her and Mordecai, they were able to save the Jews of the world. That's the book of Esther. We read it on Purim. That's called the Megillah. When you read the whole Megillah, that phrase, the whole Megillah, refers to reading the book of Esther on Purim. We read it Thursday night and Friday during the day. It's a mitzvah to hear the entire Megillah read. Jews are obligated to hear the whole Megillah. On Friday at noon, instead of our regular class, we usually have Friday at noon Pacific time. That's our getting ready for Shabbos time that we have AT Daily. But this week, that's when we're going to be doing our annual reading of the book of Esther in English. So we're going to be doing a double daf, a double page of the Talmud, Motzi Shabbos, Saturday night after Shabbos ends, usually about an hour, hour and a half after Shabbos ends in LA. So this week about 8 p.m. Pacific, about, late on Eastern. Maybe a little early, maybe 7:30. We'll see. I usually can get it going about an hour after Shabbos ends here. Also, tomorrow's class, because we'll be fasting and then we need to go to evening service and hear the Megillah as early as possible, as soon as it becomes night. So tomorrow's class is going to be 1 hour earlier than normal. That's the Thursday class, is going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific instead of 6 p.m. Pacific. Okay, who is with us as we get it going on a lovely Wednesday night? James in Indy, Melissa in Great Neck, Yehudit in South Carolina, Bill in Berkeley, Carol in Cleveland, Stephen in New Hampshire, Renee in Indy, Paula in Chicago, Pauline in Arkansas, Paula in the house with many blessings, Gail in Virginia, Crystal in British Columbia, Rochelle wishing everyone a Chag Purim Sameach. That's the greeting we can use, Chag Purim Sameach, that we should have a holiday of Purim that is joy-filled. Chag Purim Sameach. We also say a Freilichen Purim, in Yiddish, a happy Purim. Nancy in North Carolina, Steve in Tallahassee, where it's a balmy 60 degrees. Chaim wishing us to have an easy fast. Michael likes the candle. Morton in Canada. Samuel in Cologne. How do you pronounce Cologne? Cologne? How do you pronounce that in German? I don't know, but he's in Cologne, Germany. Paula says, yes, we need the light. Crystal says, I have to laugh whenever I hear the song in the grocery store and I hear one of the Maccabees or 613's parodies in my head. Sharon is in Lebanon, New Jersey. Michael in Scranton. Ann in Merced. Maritza in Texas. Raúl en El Salvador. Bienvenido, Raúl. Qué bueno que estás con nosotros. Patsy in Florida. Julia says hi. Michael in Princeton. Leslie, and so happy to be here after the Texas weather. Thank God it seems that the weather is easing up in Texas and people are coming out the other side. Michael is saying, so you pronounce it Cologne? Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Aaron says shalom, Mr. and Mrs. Litvak. And over there on the YouTube side, Gigi in British Columbia, Neil in Virginia, Lynn in Texas, and Marjorie in Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Great to be with you. All right, we're going to keep it moving. We're covering a fair amount of ground today because we're going to be doing 2 Mishnahs. Where are we holding? This is Daf Tzadi Hey, page 95, here in Tractate Pesachim. The end is not so far away. How many pages in this tractate? 121 or 120? 121, and here we are on 95. So this is chapter 9, where we're generally going to be talking a lot about Pesach Sheni, that opportunity to bring the Paschal offering a month later if you were disqualified from bringing it the first time, right? We only bring the Passover offering when the temple is standing in Jerusalem. We haven't been able to do it in 2,000 years, but when we could, and perhaps when we will, when the temple is rebuilt, so every Jew is obligated to participate in the Paschal offering, although you're excused if you are tameh, ritually impure by reason of attending to a dead body, or you're just too far away from Jerusalem to get there. But if you're close enough and you're in a state of purity, you have to do it. If you don't, if you miss it for whatever reason, if you are tameh by reason of a dead body or you're too far away, so then you should bring it a month later at Pesach Sheni. Tonight's Mishnah, both Mishnahs are very much about the differences and similarities between Pesach Rishon, that first opportunity to bring the Passover offering, and Pesach Sheni, that second opportunity. Let's get into it. Mishnah number 3, here in chapter 9 of Tractate Pesachim, the laws of Passover. What is the difference between the Paschal lamb offered on the first Pesach, Pesach Rishon, and the Paschal lamb offered on Sheni, the second Pesach? On the first Pesach, at the time of slaughtering the Paschal lamb, it is prohibited to own leavened bread. Due to the prohibitions, it shall not be eaten and it shall not be found, right? So contemporaneous with bringing the Passover offering, we're also celebrating the festival of Matzos, right? Passover is the festival of Matzos. We are prohibited, Jews are prohibited to eat leavened bread for that whole week of Passover. So no leaven shall be found in your homes. Nothing, no leavened bread nor anything that has leavened products in it. And on the first night, we must eat matzah. That's an obligation. For the rest of the week, it's optional whether you eat matzah or not, but it is absolutely prohibited to eat leavened bread or leavened products. And on the second Pesach, it is permissible for one to have both leavened bread and matzah with him in the house. So at that second Passover, if you're one of the people who's observing it because you were disqualified from bringing the Passover offering at its regular time at Passover, so at second Passover, so now you have that opportunity to participate in eating the Paschal lamb, but you don't have to clear all the leaven out of your home. Another difference is that the Paschal lamb offered on the first Pesach requires the recitation of Hallel as it is eaten, and the second does not require the recitation of Hallel as it is eaten. What is Hallel? Hallel is that series of Psalms from 113 to 118 that we recite on festivals. We recite it every day of Hanukkah, every day of Passover, every day of Sukkot. We don't recite it on Purim, interesting, but we do recite it at the beginning, Rosh Chodesh, of each Hebrew month. However, and let's go on. However, they are the same, first Passover and second Passover, Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. However, they are the same in that the Paschal lambs sacrificed on both the first and second Pesach require the recitation of Hallel as they are prepared, meaning as the lamb or the young goat is slaughtered. And they are both eaten roasted. They must be roasted, not boiled or cooked in some other way. And they are eaten with matzah and bitter herbs. So you don't have to clear all the leaven out of your house if you're observing Pesach Sheni, but if you're one of those people that is now obligated in bringing the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach, so then when you eat it, you do have to eat it accompanied by matzah and bitter herbs, just as it would have been if you'd eaten it at the Pesach Rishon. And they both override Shabbos, meaning that we slaughter the lamb even if the time of slaughtering is on Shabbos afternoon, when it's prohibited to slaughter any animal, but it does override Shabbos because you do it in its appointed time, right? So if Passover begins Saturday night, we do slaughter the lamb Saturday afternoon, and the same goes for if we're observing Pesach Sheni on the 14th of the Hebrew month of Iyar, the next month after Nisan, which contains Passover. That's Mishnah number 3. The Gemara. The sages, and I'm sorry, before I go into the Gemara, I'm just going to read where the debate ended up. Right? So this is just a nice, clear statement of these laws. And then as we discuss where the sages derive these laws from, it'll sort of make more sense if we understand what the laws are in a nice, clear statement. So here is, as the Koran states, the Halacha, the law of first and second Pesach. There are a number of differences between the first and second Pesach. On the first Pesach, it is prohibited to own leaven, and the Paschal lamb may not be slaughtered while one is in possession of leaven. However, on the second Pesach, one may have both leaven and matzah together in one's house. Meat from the Paschal lamb on the first Pesach may not be taken outside the area of the group of people who have registered to share that lamb. And so you can't take some of that meat away from the area where you're eating with your group and eat some of it while you're sitting with another group. That is prohibited. And there is a requirement to recite Hallel while eating the sacrifice. In contrast, the meat from the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach may be taken outside the area of the group who share it, or be eaten with another group, and there is no requirement to recite Hallel while eating it. In addition, a festival peace offering is brought with the Paschal lamb on the first Pesach, because the first Pesach is a festival. And so you bring these festival peace offerings that increase our simcha, our joy. The sages often say there is no simcha without meat, right? So if a bunch of people are registered on this Paschal lamb, they're each going to get a very small piece of it. So you bring some additional offerings so that everybody can fill their belly and really enjoy the meat in the festival. But Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, it's really just an opportunity to make up, your obligation to eat a piece of the Paschal lamb. It's not a major celebration, a festival Passover in its appointed time, when you would recite Hallel while eating, and the 4 cups of wine, and this all, additional offerings to eat the meat. You don't do that at Pesach Sheni. On the second. Moreover, on the first Pesach, the offering may be consumed in a state of ritual impurity, tuma, if the majority of the community is tameh, ritually impure. But on the second Pesach, the offering is neither sacrificed nor eaten in a state of tuma, right? So if more than half of the Jewish people are tameh, like, God forbid there was a war and many people were involved in burying bodies, etc. Somehow they were more than half of the population was tameh, in a state of ritual impurity, then they would still bring the offering in its regular time. Whereas normally a person who is tameh has to wait for the second Passover, right? But if the majority of the population is tameh, then we do bring it at the first Passover. During the second Passover, even if the majority of the population is tameh, no person, no individual who is himself or herself tameh can participate in Pesach Sheni. It does not override the prohibition of being tameh when you're eating a sacred food, even if more than half the population is tameh at that time. There are also a number of common elements between first and second Pesach. The slaughter of the offering overrides Shabbos. One is obligated to recite Hallel during the slaughter of the offering, and the offering must be roasted on a fire and eaten with matzah and bitter herbs. All right, now we get into the Gemara. That's the law. So now we get into the Gemara that follows the third Mishnah here in chapter 9. So the sages taught a halachic midrash. So midrash is kind of creative expounding of a law or a story that the sages bring to help us understand the law that we're studying. So the sages taught a halachic midrash pertaining to the Paschal lamb offered on the second Pesach. The verse states, with regard to the second Pesach, this is Numbers 9:12, they shall leave none of it to the morning, nor break a bone in it, according to all the entire statute of the Paschal lamb, they shall offer it. The fact that the verse says it indicates that the verse is speaking of a mitzvah, a commandment, applicable to the body of the Paschal lamb, meaning that the laws pertaining to the actual Paschal lamb on the first Pesach apply equally to the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach, as opposed to other laws of Passover, like not having leavened bread in your house, which don't pertain specifically to the Paschal lamb, so those are not going to apply at Pesach Sheni. Only the laws that apply directly to the Paschal lamb on first Pesach are also going to apply on second Pesach. But other laws of Passover that don't relate to the Paschal lamb itself will not apply at Pesach Sheni. The Midrash continues, with regard to a mitzvah related to the body of the Paschal lamb, but not actually performed on the body of the offering, from where is it derived that it also applies on the second Pesach? The verse states at Numbers 9:11, they shall eat it with matzah and bitter herbs. One might have thought that one must fulfill all mitzvahs, all obligations related to the first Pesach on the second Pesach, even mitzvahs not at all related to the body of the Paschal lamb, such as the requirement to destroy all of the leaven in one's possession. Therefore, the Torah states, and they shall not break a bone in it, which teaches that just as the prohibition of breaking a bone is notable among the mitzvahs related to the Paschal lamb, in that it is a mitzvah applicable to the Paschal lamb itself, so too, any mitzvah applicable to the Paschal lamb itself must be fulfilled on the second Pesach. However, the other mitzvahs pertaining to the first Pesach need not be fulfilled on the second Pesach. I'm going to skip down a little. The sages taught in a different baraisa. The verse states, according to the entire statute of the Paschal lamb, they shall offer it. That's the verse we just said. One might have thought that just as at the time of the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb on the first Pesach, it is prohibited to own leaven due to the prohibitions of it shall not be seen and it shall not be found, so too at the time of the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach, it is prohibited to own leaven due to the prohibitions of it shall not be seen and it shall not be found. Therefore, the Torah states, they shall eat it with matzah and bitter herbs, which indicates that the other mitzvahs pertaining to the first Pesach do not apply on the second. Obviously, we're repeating ourselves here, but we're getting it from a different source, right? First, we're doing the Gemara on the Mishna. Now, the rabbis, the Amoraim of the Talmud, are bringing another source for this same teaching from a baraisa that's contemporaneous with the Mishnah. And this baraisa continues. It has other information in it. So that first paragraph we already know. Now, the baraisa continues. And from here, I have derived only that positive mitzvahs related to the first Pesach apply on the second Pesach. What are positive mitzvahs? Thou shalt. What's a negative mitzvah? Thou shalt not. So now we have derived that positive mitzvahs related to the first Pesach apply on the second Pesach. From where do I derive that the same is true of negative mitzvahs? The verse states, they shall leave none of it to the morning, nor break a bone in it, right? So those are two requirements of when you're bringing the Paschal offering. You shall leave none of it till morning. You have to eat it all that night. That is the requirement. And you shouldn't leave any leftovers after light comes up in the morning, after the sun comes up in the morning. There shouldn't be any of the Paschal lamb left. Nor break a bone in it. You're not allowed to break a bone in the Paschal lamb, neither when you're slaughtering, nor roasting, nor eating. You don't break a bone. You can separate pieces at the joints. Of course, you separate the meat from the bone, but you can't break a bone, as we've discussed before. And the Baraisa continues, and from this verse, I have derived only that a negative mitzvah whose violation can be rectified by the fulfillment of a positive mitzvah applies on the second Passover. So that's referring to this idea, don't leave over until the morning. You're not supposed to leave any over until the morning. But if you do leave over until the morning, we also have the fix for that. The Torah specifies that anything that's left over needs to be burned as opposed to eaten. So even if you're guilty of having leftovers of the Paschal lamb, there's no punishment for that because the Torah provides the fix. Anything that is left over, you should burn it. But you should try not to have any leftover, right? So that's why you have violated a negative mitzvah if you leave some over, but the Torah provides a positive mitzvah as the fix, which I just explained. But from where is it derived that the same is true of a full-fledged negative mitzvah, one that doesn't have a correction? That's the one, and you shall not break a bone in it. So it may be concluded from these examples that just as the detail, i.e. the specific mitzvahs mentioned in these verses, is explicit and includes a positive mitzvah and a prohibition whose violation can be rectified by the fulfillment of a positive mitzvah and a full-fledged negative mitzvah, so too, every positive mitzvah, every prohibition whose violation can be rectified by the fulfillment of a positive mitzvah, and every full-fledged negative mitzvah is included, right? So all these three categories, positive mitzvah, negative mitzvah, and negative mitzvah that can be cured by a positive mitzvah, all of these three categories of laws that apply to the lamb itself at the first Pesach also apply to the lamb or the goat at the second Passover. I skip forward some more. Now I'm at the top of the B side of page 95, near the top. It was taught in the Mishna that the Paschal lamb of the first Pesach requires the recitation of Halal as it is eaten, whereas on the second Pesach, it does not. Right? So we recite the Hallel, these Psalms 113 to 118. Often they're sung. It's nice if you can sing it, but it's not required that you sing it. It's required that you recite it. Right? So part of a Passover Seder is to recite Hallel. You do some of it during, or before the festive meal, and some of it after the festive meal and after the grace after the meal. But it is part of Passover, and it was always part of Passover, like when you're eating the Paschal lamb, that you recite Halal. We don't do that at Pesach Sheni. However, we do recite, so at that first Passover, you recite Halal twice, when the lamb is being slaughtered, and then later when it's being eaten. Pesach Sheni, you have to recite Halal when it is being slaughtered, but not when it is being eaten. That's what we're learning now. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rabbi Yochanan said, citing Rabbi Shimon ben Yechotzadak, that the verse states at Isaiah chapter 30, verse 29, you shall have a song as in the night when a festival is sanctified. From here it may be derived that a night sanctified as a festival on which labor is prohibited, such as the first night of Passover, but not every night of Passover, right? Only the first night or the first two nights outside of Israel are a full-fledged festival when labor is prohibited, just like Shabbos. The only difference between a festival and Shabbos is that you can cook for the needs of the festival. On a festival, you can't cook on Shabbos. But the intermediate days of Passover, called Chol HaMoed, you can work. It's permitted to work. We do curtail our activities, but it's not a full-fledged festival. And then the last day of Passover, or the last 2 days outside of Israel, are also full-fledged festival. So from here it may be derived from this verse in Isaiah that a night sanctified as a festival on which labor is prohibited, such as the first night of Passover, requires the recitation of Halal. However, a night which is not sanctified as a festival, such as the night when the Paschal lamb is eaten following the second Pesach, does not require the recitation of Hallel. That's why we don't sing Hallel or recite Hallel on Pesach Sheni when we're eating the Paschal offering. It was stated in the Mishna that the Paschal lamb sacrificed on both the first and second Pesach do require the recitation of Hallel as they are prepared, meaning when the lamb or the goat is slaughtered. The Gemara asks, what is the reason that Hallel must be recited while one prepares the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach? And the Gemara answers, if you wish, say that the verse quoted above, as in the night when a festival is sanctified, excludes laws that apply at night, but it does not exclude laws that apply by day. Therefore, the recitation of Hallel is required while slaughtering the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach, just as it is required while slaughtering the Paschal lamb on the first Pesach. Or, if you wish, say that the Halacha, the law, simply makes logical sense. And I love this question. Is it possible that the Jewish people are slaughtering their Paschal lambs or taking their lulavim on Sukkot, meaning that the palm branches that we wave on the festival of Sukkot, and not reciting Hallel? This is written here in the Koren Talmud, it is inconceivable. Inconceivable. Like in The Princess Bride, it is inconceivable that they would not be reciting Hallel, and there is no need for an explicit biblical source for this halacha. I mean, there's always a need for a biblical source, right? No matter how accepted a practice is, the sages will always look for the biblical source. But here, this practice is just so embedded in the fiber of the Jewish soul that it is inconceivable that they would slaughter the Paschal lamb in the temple in Jerusalem when the temple is standing on the afternoon before Passover begins and not recite Hallel. And therefore, likewise, on Pesach Sheni, they must recite Hallel when they're slaughtering the lamb. It was also taught in the Mishnah that the Paschal lambs on both the first and second Pesach are eaten roasted and override Shabbos. It may be inferred from this that with regard to Shabbos, yes, it is overridden by the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach. But with regard to Tumah, to ritual impurity, no, it is not overridden for the sake of the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach. The Gemara points out that this understanding of the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. As it was taught in a Baraisa, the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach overrides Shabbos and does not override Tumah, ritual impurity. Rabbi Yehuda says it overrides even ritual impurity. The halacha, the law, as we saw at the beginning, is with the rabbis who dispute with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda got overruled. So the Gemara explains, what is the reason for the opinion of the first Tana, meaning the rabbi stating the law who disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, whom the majority of the sages agreed with? He holds that once this person was deferred from the first Pesach due to ritual impurity, shall he now return and perform the offering of the Paschal lamb on the second Pesach in ritual impurity? That was the reason he didn't bring it the first time. Why is he now going to bring it and if he's in a state of ritual impurity? And Rabbi Yehuda reasoned, the Torah sought to allow this person the opportunity to perform the offering of the Paschal lamb in ritual purity. If it ultimately becomes clear that he did not merit doing so, so let him at least perform the offering of the second Pesach in a state of ritual impurity, right? So Rabbi Yehuda on this issue is more easygoing, but the sages overruled him. That concludes our discussion of the third Mishnah here in chapter 9. Now I'll read the fourth Mishnah and we'll just begin its discussion and then we'll go to comments and questions. Mishnah number 4. When the Paschal lamb is sacrificed in a state of ritual impurity, Tumah, due to the fact that the majority of the Jewish people are ritually impure, right? Now the Torah says if one is impure by reason of a dead body, that's why they get delayed. And if the majority of the people are tameh by that reason, for that reason of a dead body, then we bring it anyway. But now what the Mishnah is addressing is, okay, that's for two, it's because those people got involved in burying the dead. They were doing like a very important thing. But what about people that were tameh by reason of other kinds of tumah, namely the kind of tumah that emerges from a person's own body, like certain, fluids coming out of a man or a woman, whether he has gonorrhea, or she is menstruating, or she's given birth, or one is a leper, as we've seen, that's somebody, the Mitzora, not leprosy like the disease we understand today, but this spiritual malady that resulted in an outbreak on the skin. So when the Paschal lamb on the first Passover is brought in a state of tumah, ritual impurity, because the majority of the Jewish people are tameh, the zavim and zavot, right? So that's the men with gonorrhea and having, urethral emissions for 3 days, and the zavot, the women who are having, spotting or blood flowing outside of the normal time of their period, and the nidot, the women who are menstruating, and women after childbirth, they may not eat it, because the Paschal lamb overrides only ritual impurity imparted by a corpse, but it does not override other forms of ritual impurity. However, if they violated the halacha and ate from the offering, they are exempt from kares. Right? So normally, if the majority of the population is not in a state of ritual impurity, so you can only participate in the Paschal offering if you yourself are tahor, in a state of ritual purity. This only counts, right, when we're bringing the Paschal lamb, because the temple is standing. These days, everybody is tameh, is presumed to be tameh. But when it is required that everyone be tahor, ritually pure, in order to participate in the Paschal lamb, if somebody who is tameh nevertheless violates the law and goes and participates in eating the lamb, that person is subject to kares, excision, death at the hands of the heavenly court. However, even though these people who have other kinds of tumah are prohibited from participating in the Paschal lamb, even when the majority of the nation is tameh by reason of touching a dead body, if they nevertheless go ahead and violate the law, then that punishment of kares does not apply to them. They shouldn't do it, but if they do it, they don't suffer that penalty, death at the hands of the heavenly court. One who eats sacrificial food in a state of ritual impurity is generally liable to receive kares. However, since in this case the offering is sacrificed in a state of tumah, ritual impurity, there is no punishment of kares, even for the ritually impure individuals who are still not permitted to eat it. And Rabbi Eliezer exempts these individuals from kares even for entering the temple. So that's a different prohibition. If you're tameh, when the temple is standing, that's why tumah is so important, the concepts of tumah and tahara, because you can't enter the temple if you're tameh, if you're in a state of ritual impurity. Rabbi Eliezer exempts these individuals from kares even for entering the temple in a state of ritual impurity, despite their not being permitted to enter, because people who are impure due to the ritual impurity imparted by a corpse are permitted to enter the temple in this situation to slaughter the lambs, because the majority of the nation is in a state of tumah. So therefore, tameh people are going to have to enter the temple in order to sacrifice the lamb, the Paschal offering. So in that situation, Rabbi Eliezer says that the people who are tameh for other reasons of tumah, if they entered the temple, they shouldn't do it. But if they did it, they're not going to be subject to kares. The Gemara. We're just going to do the first two clauses of the Gemara. The sages taught in a baraisa with regard to zavim and zavot, right? Men who have had this gonorrheal discharge, or women having a flow outside their menses, in both cases for 3 days, and menstruating women and women after childbirth who ate of the Paschal lamb that was sacrificed while the majority of the Jewish people were in a state of ritual impurity. One might have thought that they would be liable to receive kares. Therefore, the verse states, the meat that touches any impure thing shall not be eaten. It shall be burned in fire. And the meat, everyone that is ritually pure may eat the meat. But the soul that eats of the meat of the sacrifice of peace offerings that belong to the Lord, who has his impurity upon him, that soul shall be cut off from his people, right? That's the wording in the Torah. That soul shall be cut off from his people. That's kares. That's death at the hands of the heavenly court. No earthly court will impose that sentence. But if you commit that kind of a sin, it's possible that your life will be shortened. I mean, obviously that sin will be weighed against all your merits and your other demerits, etc. But the Baraisa continues that the juxtaposition of these verses teaches that if the offering is eaten only by people who are ritually pure, okay, so then ritually impure people are liable for eating it due to being ritually impure, and they receive kares. But if the offering's already being eaten by ritually impure people because the majority of the population is impure, then these other people who aren't supposed to eat it because they have a different kind of impurity, that the punishment, that soul shall be cut off from his people, does not apply to them. And that is the law. A Paschal lamb brought in a state of ritual impurity may be eaten by an impure person ab initio only if he is impure due to ritual impurity imparted by a corpse or due to contact with another source of impurity, such as a dead, creeping animal, as opposed to it comes out of his own person. However, one whose own body is the source of his ritual impurity, such as the Mitzora or the Zav or the Zava, may not eat the Paschal lamb. If he does eat from it, he is not liable to receive kares. He is also prohibited from entering the temple courtyard. If he does so, he is liable to receive kares, right? So you should not enter the temple in that state. You would be subject to kares. All right, let's go to comments and questions. Here we go. And I know Nina had to go out to pick up one of the kids, so she's put two questions in here for me. I'll look at these and then I'll scan the comments to see if there's anything else. So Neil, on Pesach Rishon, there is a festival of Matzah. No makeup for this. Is there a penalty for not participating in this Matzah festival? I can't recall if we learned this. You're saying, so as we see, there's no obligation to remove the leaven from your house at Pesach Sheni like there is at Pesach Rishon. There is an obligation to eat matzah on the first night of Passover in Israel. If you're subject to Pesach Sheni because you were impure during Pesach Rishon, you don't have to eat matzah, except that you do because the Paschal offering has to be eaten with matzah and bitter herbs. So you're not eating matzah because you have an obligation to eat matzah. You're eating matzah because it has to accompany the Paschal lamb. That's a Pesach Sheni. Are you asking me if you neglected to eat matzah at Pesach Rishon, so then you violated a positive commandment, right? You were supposed to do that and you didn't do that. Is there a makeup for that? I don't know. I don't think so. It doesn't seem like that. I mean, you can atone for it, right? Anytime we have a transgression, we can make teshuvah. We can atone for our transgression. But I don't think there's a specific makeup for that the way that there is Pesach Sheni for not being able to eat the Paschal lamb the first time. Sharon, it says in the Siddur that the custom of some to do Hallel at Mariv for the festival nights of Pesach. It says in the Siddur that it is the custom of some to recite Hallel at Mariv, the evening service, for the festival nights of Pesach. Is this related to the Halacha of saying Hallel during the sacrifices? That's so interesting. I wasn't aware of that, right? I mean, there is in the sense that we say Hallel at the Seder, right? So the festival nights of Pesach, right? So that's what it is. I mean, we're saying Hallel by the Seder. So, it's the first night in Israel, the first 2 nights outside of Israel. Does it say in the Siddur that we say Hallel on the nights of the 7th and 8th day outside Israel, the 7th night in Israel? I wasn't aware of that custom. If that is so, then it's not related to reciting Hallel while eating the lamb.
You're not on camera for some reason. Did you knock the camera or something?
Oh. Ha, thank you. How long has that been going on? Okay.
That was my computer.
Thanks. Okay. Whoops. Back on camera. So yeah, I mean, if it's just relates to the first festival nights, then maybe it is related to the fact that we say Hallel while eating the lamb. If it applies also on the last nights, then I don't know where it comes from. I wasn't familiar with that. And finally, Pauline, is Hallel a prayer or hymn, and where would I find it? So Hallel is that set of Psalms 113 through 118, includes having some of the verses repeated. It is often sung, and there are melodies, some famous melodies. So if you Google Rosh Chodesh Hallel, accidental Talmudist, so I have broadcast, when we're singing Hallel back before COVID, and some of those videos have like 100,000 views, where we would get quite raucous with singing Hallel, at least for Rosh Chodesh, for the celebrating the new month. That's called the small Hallel because just a couple of the psalms or a couple of paragraphs are left out of the Hallel. But generally speaking, what we're talking about is we're reciting psalms and songs of thanksgiving and praise on festivals and beginning the new month, right? So we do that every day of Passover, every day of Hanukkah, every day of Sukkot. I'm sure we do it on Shavuos, and we do it on the new months. We don't do it on Purim. I'm not sure why they didn't institute to say Hallel on Purim, but that's what Hallel is. And if you want to hear it sung with Carl Bach melodies, like I said, Google accidental Talmudist Rosh Chodesh Hallel, and maybe we'll get a link to that in the comments. Okay, that's what I've got for us this evening. For those who are observing the fast tomorrow, may you have a meaningful fast. We always say, may you have an easy fast. Why are we fasting to have an easy fast? We're saying you shouldn't suffer excessively. But fasting is hard. But what it should be is meaningful, right? You should have a meaningful fast. This is one of the minor fasts, the fast of Esther. So as opposed to Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, which is a 25-hour fast, from before twilight to after twilight on the next night. A minor fast means we don't eat during the daylight. So you can get up really early tomorrow and have breakfast while it's still dark. And then we fast until the end of the day. Then we go to the evening service, Maariv, and then we read the Megillah, and then we break the fast. That's how that works tomorrow. So may everyone observing the fast have a meaningful fast. We'll be having our class 1 hour early tomorrow, and I'll be weak at the end of the fast, and then I got to run to services. And then on Friday, instead of our noon Pacific class, we'll be having our annual reading of the book of Esther in English. The donate button will be on, but all donations that come in through the Facebook donate button during that live reading on Facebook will be, and I guess we'll broadcast it. No, to have the donate button, it's only going to be on Facebook. It's not going to be on YouTube. And any donations that come in are just going to flow through us and go to the organizations that support the poor and the hungry. All right, because that's the mitzvah, is to give tzedakah to the poor and the hungry on Purim. So that'll be at noon on Friday. Have a great night.